Have you ever followed the bouncing red ball, made famous by legendary animator Max Fleischer? The bouncing red ball was a technique used to direct sing alongs in movie theaters in the earliest part of the 20th century. The lyrics were displayed, and the ball bounced along with each word or syllable of the lyrics in sync with the beat and rhythm of the song. The device, associating a color with meaning in pattern, is important to consider for creating sequential imagery. When thinking about images in sequence, we often think of books and magazines, but animation, websites, apps, and ebooks require visual linkage to hold all the parts together as a design. Color can create both the design linkage and impart meaning at the same time. A good example is one of my own projects, Before I Go to Sleep by Thomas Hood, a picture book and now ebook app by DemiBooks. The story is a poem written in the 19th century, so consulting with the author on what he intended was out of the question. For this story, a young boy is trying to get to sleep, but can't. It's summer and the sun is still streaming through his window. The boy amuses himself by imagining that he's a parade of animals doing fantastic things, his mind moving slowly towards dreamland. My design challenge here was to figure out how to indicate to the child reader that a particular animal on each page was meant to represent the boy. I decided that a pattern and a color of the boy's pajama stripe, repeated on the animal he imagined he would be, would symbolize the boy for the reader. I had to make sure the color and pattern were consistent enough to be recognized, no matter what form they took, and dominant enough in the image to be noticed. I've read this book to kids countless times and have found that the visual clue of the pajama stripe is all they need to believe the animal is actually the boy. A leap of the mind to accept an imaginary flight based on nothing more than turquoise and white stripes. Color that repeats in a rhythm is a common device used to clue the viewer in to an important element in a series of images, either as an isolated color or as a recognizable pattern. The color acts as an invisible cord tying each image together, and like a zip line, helps carry the viewer along for the ride. We can thank Sir Isaac Newton for creating the very useful tool known as the color wheel. He demonstrated that light alone was responsible for our perception of color and devised the first color wheel in 1666 as a circular diagram for understanding a color system in an organized fashion. Since then, there have been many variations created and much debate about color theory. But I'll focus on just one color wheel that presents the colors clearly. The color wheel is an organizational tool that helps make the basic categories of color easier to understand. As a graph, it makes the different types of color clear and can help you as a first point of reference in deciding on a palette. This diagram demonstrates the three basic categories of colors: primary, secondary, and tertiary. A primary color is a color that cannot be made by mixing other colors, and like prime numbers, cannot be broken down further. They are the source of other colors. Primaries are blue, red, and yellow. A secondary color is a color made by mixing two primaries. Secondary colors are orange, green, and purple. Complementary colors are any two colors that are opposite on the color wheel, such as red and green, blue and orange, purple and yellow. All secondary colors are complements of one another as well. A tertiary color is made by mixing either one primary and one secondary from the opposite side of the color wheel, all three primaries, or two secondary colors. Tertiary colors are variations of browns and grays. The color wheel is a useful guide for understanding color and the basic breakdown of each color type. It's an organizational tool only and should provide a framework for thinking about colors and categories that will help you use color more effectively. There's a common misunderstanding that there's only one primary blue, red, and yellow. Actually, there are many variations of blues, reds, and yellows that are all considered primary. People think that when you mix red and blue, you get purple, but that's not always the case. To demonstrate the variations of colors that come from the different primaries and show you that red and blue can make something very different than purple, I'll use the traditional media of watercolor and show the effect by painting. Here are some simple blues that would fall into the primary category, but are very different one from the other. Let's take ultramarine and phthalo blue from this chart. Both are primaries, but ultramarine is closer to purple than phthalo blue. Phthalo blue feels slightly more green than ultramarine, a bit less purple. Although neither color can be broken down into other colors, they appear different one from the other to our eye. Let's look at the variety of primary reds and then do some color mixing. For primary reds, we have cadmium red and permanent rose, which create entirely different secondary colors depending on the blues they're combined with. Ultramarine and cadmium red create brown versus phthalo blue and cadmium red, which creates different tertiary colors. Now let's mix phthalo blue and permanent rose, then ultramarine and permanent rose. The first two sets of primaries create a kind of brownish purple color, and the second two primaries create a more vibrant purple. Here you can see these two mixes from light to dark. They are all very different colors, though all are a mix of primary red and a primary blue. You might wonder why there's so much variation between the mixes. It's because cadmium red is closer to orange than the other primary reds, and ultramarine is closer to purple. Since orange and purple are complementary colors, they have a slight neutralizing or vibrancy reducing effect on each other. To neutralize means to reduce the saturation or vibrancy of a color. Colors are neutralized in the following ways: combining two or all three complementary colors, combining all three primary colors, mixing white into a color, mixing black into a color, or mixing two primaries that act as complements. When combining permanent rose and ultramarine, or permanent rose and phthalo blue, each creates a more vibrant purple than the first two grouping of primaries. Although phthalo blue is slightly closer to green and ever so slightly neutralizes permanent rose, ultramarine is a blue with no green quality and thus creates a very vibrant purple for permanent rose, a distinctly more purple kind of red than cadmium red. Thus, the most vibrant purple is made from ultramarine and permanent rose because there's no complementary reaction of any kind between these two colors. The best way to know what hues result from mixing different primary, secondary, and tertiary colors is to create a color chart. It doesn't matter if it's created traditionally or digitally. Learning what color results from adding two or more colors together comes from combining colors and creating a chart to remember the combinations, like this one. Referring to charts will help you remember the color recipe, so you never get brown when you really want purple. The word play is the